how to never get angry or bothered by anyone. He who angers you conquers you. These powerful words by Elizabeth Kenny capture the essence of emotional freedom. In a world where everyone is reactive, imagine becoming someone who cannot be disturbed, someone who no longer dances to the chaos of others. Carl Jung's most chilling insight wasn't about anger itself. It was about the kind of inner transformation that makes you psychologically untouchable. On Spiritual Wisdom, we dive deep into how you can embody this state of spiritual intelligence, where peace is no longer a reaction, but a choice. Have you ever experienced a moment when you refused to let someone's energy control your own? Share your story in the comments as we're growing through this together. 1. Emotional immunity is real and rare. Carl Jung's most unsettling insight wasn't about anger. It was about the rare individuals who had become emotionally immune, not through repression or denial, but through inner transformation. These people didn't react because there was nothing left in them to be triggered. Their emotions weren't chained to the unpredictable behavior of others. They weren't calm because they practiced stoic restraint. They were calm because they had dissolved the ego's need to defend itself. When insulted, they didn't flinch. When dismissed, they didn't chase. When misunderstood, they didn't explain. Because their peace was no longer negotiable. This wasn't emotional detachment. It was emotional evolution. They had reached a level of self-awareness where the chaos of the external world could not corrupt the stillness of their internal state. It wasn't about building walls. It was about removing the hooks that others could latch onto. No wounds left to poke. No insecurities to exploit. They had burned through the illusions of ego, and what remained was a kind of intelligent spiritual intelligence that made them untouchable. Jung called this state emotional impermeability, and it disturbed him because it showed how rarely human beings reach it. These individuals had walked through fire, not avoiding pain, but allowing it to purify them. And on the other side of that fire, they emerged untethered. The world could still scream, criticize, reject, and betray, but none of it could reach the core of who they had become, not because they were cold, but because they were free. They no longer lived in reaction to life. They lived from a place of deep, unshakable presence. When Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes," he was pointing to this exact awakening, one that makes you immune to the emotional games of others. You don't get to this place by wishing. You get there by doing the deep work of turning inward, by facing your shadows, healing your triggers, and removing the emotional debris that others use to control you. These people stopped asking, "Why did they treat me that way?" and started asking, "What part of me believed I had to tolerate it?" Their immunity wasn't apathy. It was clarity. It was a shift from needing to be understood to simply being, from needing to win to needing nothing at all. When you are no longer bothered by others, you don't become less human. You become more divine. You embody a different frequency, one that cannot be pulled into conflict, gossip, or shame. This is the intelligence Carl Jung wanted us to understand. This is the spiritual wisdom few dare to embody. Because once you reach this level, you are no longer part of the emotional economy. You no longer react, perform, or participate. You simply remain rooted in your truth. And in that stillness, you reclaim a power greater than anger, greater than control piece. comment below. I embody emotional immunity. If you're ready to rise above the noise and claim your spiritual power. 2. The shadow mirror. Triggers are teachers. Jung's insight into Heinrich's case revealed a profound truth. Those who no longer get angry haven't suppressed their emotions. They've transmuted them. They've made peace with their shadow, the hidden side of the psyche that holds our fears, insecurities, and wounds. And because of this deep integration, they no longer see external behavior as personal attacks, but as mirrors reflecting their own unconscious terrain. A rude person isn't a threat. They reflect an unhealed fear of inadequacy. A critical family member doesn't define your worth. They echo your lingering self-doubt. Emotional triggers, then, are not meant to break you, but to wake you. This is the true intelligence of spiritual wisdom, learning to decode the signals of the world without letting them shake your inner ground. When you're truly anchored in self-awareness, every moment of discomfort becomes an invitation to evolve. You're no longer trying to win arguments or prove your value because your worth isn't up for negotiation. It's already known within. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And in this light, your enemies become your educators. The person who insults you is showing you where your identity is still fragile. The one who ignores you is reminding you where you've attached your presence to being seen. And in this unraveling, you start to reclaim your emotional freedom piece by piece. You begin to witness anger not as something to avoid or deny, but as a sacred mirror held up by the universe showing you where your healing still lives. In modern life, this ability to transmute anger into awareness is a superpower. We live in a world addicted to reaction, where outrage is currency and victimhood is glorified. But the spiritually awakened individual doesn't bite the bait. They pause, breathe, and ask the question no one else thinks to ask. What is this showing me about myself? This question alone collapses ego and opens the door to higher understanding. It's not about tolerating abuse or staying silent. It's about choosing discernment over drama. The mature soul learns that not every fire deserves fuel, and sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Silence, when rooted in clarity, speaks louder than retaliation. As you continue walking this path of inner mastery, you'll realize that people's judgments no longer pierce you, because there's nothing left in you that clings to their validation. Emotional immunity isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming whole. You feel everything, but you are enslaved by nothing. You experience criticism, but it doesn't collapse your self-image. You hear projections, but they don't penetrate your truth. And this is when the world loses its power to shake you, because you've stopped giving it the keys to your nervous system. Spiritual awakening, at its core, is not about escaping conflict or floating above reality. It's about diving into the places where you used to flinch and reclaiming your presence there. You become the calm eye in the middle of the storm, not because life got easier, but because you got clearer. And that clarity is everything. It's the reason you no longer chase apologies. It's the reason silence doesn't scare you. It's the reason triggers now feel like invitations to rise, not reasons to break. In the end, the emotionally sovereign soul walks through life not needing to fight, but radiating a frequency so rooted, so rare, that nothing can knock them off center. Not because they're above it all, but because they've seen it all, healed through it all, and now walk with a quiet power that no chaos can touch. Are you ready to face your triggers and turn them into your greatest teachers? If so, comment below. I will meditate to show your commitment to this powerful journey of self-discovery. 3. The reaction gap. Freedom between stimulus and response. Jung's concept of the reaction gap reveals a powerful truth. Between the moment something triggers you and the moment you respond, there is a sacred space, a space where your freedom lives. This space is not an illusion or a luxury reserved for spiritual masters. It is a trainable, accessible psychological threshold that anyone committed to spiritual development can enter. Heinrich described this moment as if time itself slowed down an experience of heightened awareness that allowed him to pause, breathe, and choose how to respond instead of reacting impulsively. Jung recognized this not as a coping mechanism, but as a radical act of self-mastery. He saw that anger isn't automatic, it's habitual. And when you begin to witness your own internal processes through the lens of the observer protocol, you step outside the loop of emotional reactivity and into the power of conscious choice. You stop living on autopilot. You begin responding to life instead of being controlled by it. This reaction gap is where spiritual awakening happens in real time. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign. When someone criticizes you, tries to offend you, or belittles you, they're not forcing you to react. They're offering you an invitation to join them in a lower state of consciousness. But you are under no obligation to attend. Through spiritual wisdom, you realize that you are not a reflection of their projection. You are the guardian of your own energy. You don't react because your worth isn't up for debate. You don't retaliate because you've outgrown the need to defend a false identity. And so, in the reaction gap, you begin to understand the difference between power and control. Control wants to dominate the external. Power is the ability to remain internally still in the midst of chaos. In modern life, we're conditioned to react quickly to texts, to news, to opinions, to insults. But the more we react, the more we become puppets of our environment. Practicing the observer protocol is how we cut those strings. By slowing down and witnessing your triggers without judgment, you begin to rewire your nervous system. That space between stimulus and response grows wider. It becomes a sanctuary. It becomes your teacher. And with time, you realize that your inner peace is not something you protect through avoidance. It's something you embody through awareness. The more you honor that space, the less reactive you become, and the more magnetic your presence feels to others. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because calm is rare, and rare is powerful. Choosing peace doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise. It means you've transcended the need to be right, to win, to prove. You no longer outsource your peace to external validation. That is the heart of spirituality, claiming full responsibility for your energy and learning to respond from presence, not pain. Anger may still arise, but it no longer owns you. It passes through, like weather across the sky, and you remain the sky, vast, aware, unshaken. In this state, every emotional trigger becomes an opportunity to deepen your spiritual development. Every moment of tension becomes an invitation to pause, to reflect, and to choose a higher path. And every time you do, you become less reactive and more radiant, less controlled and more conscious less conditioned, and more free. 4. The boundary fortress, protecting inner peace. Emotionally immune. People don't just ignore negativity, they outgrow it. They move through life with a quiet inner intelligence that filters what deserves their energy and what doesn't. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. Their first defense is a powerful internal tool called the relevance filter. Every word, every opinion, every insult gets silently asked, does this help me grow? If not, it doesn't land. Like a fortress guarded by wisdom, their mind only lets in what elevates. This isn't avoidance, it's alignment. In a world obsessed with reacting, they choose to respond only to truth. Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." That awakening creates a spiritual boundary where the noise of the world fades beneath the strength of self-awareness. But it doesn't stop there. Their second layer of emotional strength is the ownership boundary. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes precision. They don't absorb projections, guilt, or emotional manipulation. When someone tries to dump their pain onto them, they don't resist. They simply refuse to pick it up. They know what belongs to them and what doesn't. Most people spend their lives carrying emotions that were never theirs to begin with. But those who are emotionally free have trained themselves to pause, to observe, and to say, "That's your storm, not mine." Jung understood the dangers of projection and how easily people throw their shadows at others. But intelligent people who have integrated their pain don't react to shadows. They stand in light. And at the center of all of this is the identity fortress. It's not ego. It's not defense. It's presence. These individuals are so rooted in who they are that nothing from the outside can destabilize them. They don't seek validation because they already live in self-recognition. Criticism doesn't shake them because it doesn't touch who they are. Their worth isn't outsourced. Their peace isn't up for discussion. They've walked through fire to know themselves, and now they don't flinch when tested. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, not perfect. And in that wholeness, external attacks lose power because there's no internal wound left to hit. They don't suppress emotion. They've alchemized it. They don't shut people out. They let truth in and leave drama out. To live like this is not to disconnect, but to evolve. It's not about being untouched by life, but untouched by what doesn't align with your purpose. These boundaries of relevance, ownership, identity aren't cages. They're codes of liberation. And every time you choose discernment over reaction, sovereignty over validation, peace over pride, you build your fortress stronger. Not to hide, but to rise. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss a moment of peace-protecting wisdom like this. Type in the comments, "I deserve to live a financially prosperous life," if you're ready to guard your energy and manifest abundance. 5. Projection reversal. See through the attack. Every insult is a confession, Carl Jung revealed, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a direct spiritual key one that unlocks the hidden psychology behind projection and emotional attacks. When someone calls you heartless, it often speaks more about their fear of not being loved than any truth about you. When a client belittles your work as amateur, it may be because they silently fear they're a fraud. These accusations are not reflections of your reality, but of theirs. Jung's spiritually awakened patients were not emotionally immune by accident. They developed a sharp inner clarity, a kind of psychological X-ray vision that allowed them to decode every insult as a message about the attacker's own suffering. They didn't react to provocation because they saw through it. They had undergone a transformation so deep that someone else's opinion became irrelevant to their emotional state. That's not spiritual detachment. It's emotional intelligence in its highest form, where spiritual wisdom meets psychological sovereignty. When you understand projection, you stop wasting energy trying to defend your identity. You realize the attack isn't about you. It's a loud echo of someone else's silence, a cry for help wrapped in judgment. And the more conscious you become, the more invisible their bait becomes. This isn't emotional numbness. It's the clarity that arises from a deep spiritual awakening. You start to witness others, not through the lens of your ego, but through the lens of compassion. You understand that people are not attacking you. They are discharging their pain. Your spiritual power doesn't come from blocking the world out, but from seeing it clearly, without confusion. You become untouchable, not because you are guarded, but because you are grounded. You no longer absorb projections as personal truths. You observe them as spiritual teachers. Each insult becomes a revelation. Each attack becomes a map, pointing not to your weakness, but to their inner chaos. Modern life throws projections at us everywhere online, in relationships, at work, and your awakening lies in your response. Will you mirror their wound, or will you become the mirror that reveals it? True spiritual mastery is silent, centered, and serene in the face of emotional chaos. It sees the storm coming, but does not let it enter. And in that stillness, you reclaim your energy. You become a lighthouse stable, strong, and shining, not because others approve of you, but because you've stopped needing them to. That is not a weakness. That is power. That is the spiritual wisdom Jung left behind, not for the faint-hearted, but for those ready to evolve beyond reaction and into realization. If you believe that wisdom helps you rise above personal attacks, comment below with faith. I see clearly, I respond wisely. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay on this journey of spiritual growth with us. 6. Emotional alchemy, transforming triggers into growth. Emotional alchemy is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending that certain people don't bother you. It's about transforming every emotional trigger into a tool for spiritual development. Carl Jung didn't just encourage us to notice our emotions. He urged us to understand that what irritates us about others is a direct mirror reflecting what we've yet to resolve within ourselves. When someone frustrates you, they're not the problem, they're the portal. The spiritually awakened do not run from discomfort. They use it as a guidepost. They ask, what is this emotion trying to show me about myself? This question, when used honestly, exposes the unhealed parts of your psyche that are still reactive, still attached, still easily disturbed. And once identified, those very weaknesses become the blueprint for your strength. You begin to notice that criticism only stings where insecurity lives. That rejection only hurts where approval is still craved. And that anger only rises where control is still being clung to. These moments are not setbacks. They're sacred invitations to evolve beyond who you were yesterday. You stop seeing difficult people as problems to solve and begin seeing them as teachers of your inner resilience. Instead of thinking, "They're disrespecting me," you begin to ask, "Why do I still need their respect to feel worthy?" That subtle shift changes everything. You no longer react blindly. You respond wisely. You stop handing over your emotional control to others because you understand now that mastery is not built on avoiding triggers, but facing them with consciousness. Every moment of discomfort becomes a lesson in self-awareness, a spiritual mirror reflecting your next stage of development. This is the essence of emotional alchemy, turning the lead of reactivity into the gold of clarity. Spirituality is not about being unaffected by life. It's about being so deeply grounded that nothing can pull you out of alignment. You remain centered not because the world is calm, but because you are. And that kind of presence cannot be faked. It comes only from deep inner work, the willingness to meet every trigger with reflection instead of reaction. True spiritual awakening begins when you stop expecting others to change and instead devote yourself to transforming the way you interpret their behavior. You begin to realize that no one can truly hurt you unless you give them that access. Emotional freedom comes not from changing the world, but from changing your relationship to it. You move from being emotionally fragile to spiritually sovereign. You stop waiting for peace to arrive and start becoming the peace itself. So every time you feel anger rise, every time someone challenges your patience or bruises your pride, remember, this is not just an interruption, it is your initiation. It is your opportunity to practice the most sacred form of power, the ability to choose your response, to turn pain into wisdom, and to walk forward not wounded, but awakened. This is the path of emotional alchemy. This is the power of true spiritual development. 7. The compassionate warrior, strong yet soft. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that truth becomes undeniable when you realize that real strength isn't about shutting down your emotions. It's about learning how to hold them with intelligence and spiritual wisdom. Compassionate immunity is the highest form of inner mastery, not because you no longer feel, but because you've stopped allowing external chaos to control your internal reality. You don't numb yourself, you refine yourself. You don't build walls, you build presence. And that presence becomes a sanctuary no one can invade. You become calm, not to distance yourself from others, but to create space where their chaos doesn't enter, where your peace becomes a silent invitation for them to rise without you falling. This is not emotional detachment. It is spiritual alignment. You stop absorbing projections. Stop dancing with drama. Stop identifying with every emotional wave that comes your way. And instead, you anchor yourself in something far deeper than reactivity. You anchor yourself in self-awareness, in energetic discipline, in truth. As you rise into this version of yourself, you begin to embody what Jung warned us not to misuse: the temptation to feel emotionally superior. But the truly awakened don't look down. They extend a hand. They understand that emotional triggers are teachers, not enemies. And every moment you don't react is a moment you remember who you are. You learn to support others without carrying their suffering. You learn to listen without losing yourself. You learn to love with boundaries and walk away with grace. You become soft, but not weak. Strong, but not sharp. Present, but not porous. And this balance is what Jung would call the true expression of individuation, the point where you no longer split yourself to fit the world, but instead stand whole and let the world recalibrate around you. You use your calm not as a defense mechanism, but as a bridge, a spiritual offering. You don't need to prove anything, win any argument, or correct anyone's perception of you, because you are no longer living from reaction. You are living from intention. And that intention is rooted in clarity, discipline, and an unshakable inner compass. When someone throws their anger at you, you don't flinch not because you're numb, but because you see through it. You recognize that their pain is not your assignment, that their chaos is not your responsibility, and that your presence itself is already a healing vibration. This is the true spiritual awakening. The moment you stop trying to control the world outside and begin mastering the world within. If this message resonated with you, let it guide your next moment of peace. Remember, true power lies in not reacting, but in choosing stillness. If you're ready to live with emotional clarity and spiritual strength, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful insight on the path of awakening. Your journey to deeper self-mastery starts now. How to never get angry or bothered by anyone. He who angers you conquers you. These words remind us that our peace is the ultimate power. Carl Jung believed that much of what irritates us in others is often a reflection of what we haven't yet accepted within ourselves. In today's video, you'll learn how to reclaim your emotional sovereignty, transform triggers into teachers, and live from a space of spiritual intelligence and inner mastery. Imagine no longer being shaken by someone else's chaos. What would your life feel like then? As you watch, I invite you to reflect. What usually triggers you, and how can you transmute that into wisdom? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because your insight might be the light someone else needs. Let's begin. 1. Your reactions are your choice. Your reaction is your choice, your power, your turning point. You can either hand over your emotional sovereignty to someone else's words and behavior, or you can pause, observe, and reclaim your inner authority. The most powerful people aren't the ones who never get offended. They're the ones who know how to alchemize offense into insight. Every time someone provokes you, the universe is handing you a mirror, not a weapon. Most people swing that mirror like a sword, trying to defend their ego. But the wise ones stare into it and ask, what within me is responding so violently? What wound is asking to be healed? This is where true spiritual awakening begins, not in avoiding conflict, but in responding from consciousness rather than from pain. The ego seeks to react. It wants to prove, defend, and dominate. But the soul seeks to rise. It wants peace, not power. The difference between reaction and response is the difference between unconsciousness and spiritual intelligence. When you respond with awareness, you stop letting other people dictate your emotional weather. Just because someone storms into your day doesn't mean you have to get wet. You are not obligated to absorb the energy that others project. In fact, the most evolved souls are not the ones who control others, but the ones who master their own inner state regardless of what others do. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that what we see in others is often what we have yet to face in ourselves. So when someone disrespects you, gossips about you, ignores you, or even mocks you, it's not about them. It's about whether you will allow that to shape your inner world. In the modern age, we are surrounded by triggers, online, offline, in relationships, in traffic, at work. But every trigger is an invitation, a test of your alignment, not your tolerance. Choosing to respond with presence instead of reacting with pain is the mark of deep inner maturity. This doesn't mean being passive. It means being sovereign. It means you get to decide who enters your peace and what energy you give permission to alter your frequency. Emotional discipline is not suppression. It's spiritual clarity. It's the deep knowing that you no longer dance to the rhythm of someone else's dysfunction. The real flex is being able to walk away without closing your heart. The real power is being able to smile, not because you're weak, but because you've grown. This is not just a mindset, it's a vibration. And the more you choose it, the less the world can shake you. Because the one who cannot be disturbed cannot be controlled. And in that stillness, you meet yourself. Have you ever practiced pausing before reacting to protect your peace? If so, let us know how it's helped you. If not, comment, "I will pause before I react," to start cultivating emotional mastery with us. 2. Stop expecting others to behave like you. When you stop expecting others to behave like you set yourself free from one of the most draining emotional traps, the illusion of control. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's not just a quote, it's a mirror. The anger, the offense, the disappointment you feel when someone acts carelessly, lies, betrays, or disrespects you isn't just about what they did. It's about the silent contract you wrote in your mind, believing they would act with your same values, your same level of intelligence, emotional depth, or spiritual wisdom. But they won't, and they're not supposed to. Expecting people to mirror your integrity is like trying to download advanced software into a system that hasn't been updated in years. Not everyone is designed to meet you where you are, and that's not arrogance, it's clarity. People behave based on their own level of consciousness, and when you force them into your mold, you begin to suffer not because of their actions, but because of your expectations. Spiritual awakening requires you to see clearly without needing to control. You must allow others the dignity of their own path, even when it collides with yours. You may have chosen healing, growth, awareness, but they may still be choosing projection, survival, or ego defense. You're not here to fix them. You're here to master your reaction to them. The true test of your evolution isn't how spiritual you sound, but how calm you remain when someone tries to pull you back into the chaos you've already outgrown. Detachment, in this case, is intelligence, not indifference. It is grace choosing itself. There will be people who misunderstand your silence as weakness, your peace as passivity, your distance as arrogance. Let them. Because your soul didn't come here to explain itself to people committed to misreading your energy. The deeper you go into your own healing, the more you realize that your power isn't in how you control others, it's in how you can serve yourself. You learn to walk away, not to prove a point, but to protect your frequency, not to punish them, but to preserve your power. You are not for everyone, and that is your superpower. The more you expect others to have your heart, your honesty, your effort, the more you drain yourself. Some people are not capable of meeting you, not because they're evil, but because they're asleep. Let them sleep. Let them go. Your peace is the highest form of intelligence. You don't need to be angry to be strong. You don't need to be reactive to be respected. The rarest kind of power is the kind that doesn't flinch. You are the calm in the storm, the stillness in the noise, the observer, not the reactor. When you stop expecting others to act like you stop giving them the power to shake your inner world. You begin to live from within, not from their behavior. That's not just maturity, that's sovereignty. Are you ready to stop expecting others to be just like you? If so, comment below, "I choose acceptance," to show your commitment to inner peace and emotional freedom. Let's grow together, one mindful choice at a time. 3. Let go of the need to always be right. The need to always be right is one of the most deceptive traps of the ego. It convinces you that control is strength, that dominance is intelligence, and that being heard is the same as being understood. But true spiritual development begins when you release that craving. You don't need to win every argument to be powerful. In fact, Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." What triggers you is not your enemy, it's your mirror. When someone challenges your belief or questions your viewpoint, your reaction reveals your level of inner peace. If you're quick to defend, to interrupt, to insist that they just don't get it, what you're really saying is that a part of you still needs external validation. That's not a flaw, it's a lesson. One that asks you to stop outsourcing your worth to other people's agreement. Spirituality teaches us that peace is greater than pride. Wisdom knows that silence is louder than noise. The moment you choose not to respond to provocation, not to explain yourself to be seen, not to argue to be right, you transcend the battlefield altogether. When you let go of the need to be right, you begin to access a different frequency of energy, one that is not about proving, but about preserving. You preserve your energy, your attention, your emotional state. You stop hemorrhaging power every time someone disagrees with you. And ironically, the more you detach from needing to convince others, the more magnetic and influential you become. People are drawn to those who don't flinch at disapproval, who don't collapse when misunderstood. That's the kind of presence that comes from true spiritual wisdom. It's not passive, it's powerful. Carl Jung reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And for many of us, the unconscious desire to always be right is a symptom of deeper emotional wounds, times when we felt dismissed, unseen, silenced. But your healing does not come through loudness. It comes through stillness, through realizing that your worth is not conditional upon being understood. It's anchored in your essence, not your arguments. The more you practice this detachment, the more peace you experience in every area of your life. You stop taking things personally. You stop needing the last word. You begin to notice how many people live in constant mental battles, defending, justifying, correcting, without realizing they're draining themselves. And while others keep fighting to be right, you're choosing to be free. You're choosing peace over performance, awareness over approval. This is not a weakness. This is mastery. This is where spiritual intelligence becomes visible, not in how much you know, but in how little you need to prove. So when tension arises, let your calm lead. Let your energy stay neutral. Let your spirit remain grounded. That's how you protect your power. That's how you rise. If this message helped you release the need to always be right, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep growing in peace and understanding together. 4. Don't let others define your worth. People will try to define you through their own limitations, but their opinions are not your identity. The moment you allow others to determine your worth is the moment you hand over your spiritual authority. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet many people never live that truth because they're trapped in the loop of proving, pleasing, and performing. But you were not born to shrink to fit anyone's comfort zone. You were born to expand, to remember, and to protect the sacred energy that you carry. When someone criticizes or dismisses you, it's often their own shadow reacting to your light. That rejection you felt, it wasn't about your worth, it was about their wounds. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that projection is the language of unconscious pain, and your task is not to absorb it, but to witness it without letting it shake your foundation. In a world that constantly tries to monetize attention and manufacture insecurity, choosing to know your worth without external approval is a spiritual awakening in itself. It's not just about confidence, it's about reclaiming the power you gave away. You are not your job title. You are not your follower count. You are not your past mistakes or someone else's opinion of what's possible for you. Your worth is ancient. It existed before anyone had a name for it. And yet, if you keep waiting for the world to mirror it back to you, you'll always feel like something's missing. Stop waiting to be seen by people who were never meant to understand your frequency. The rarest souls are often misread by those who lack the spiritual depth to recognize divine presence in human form. Your energy is sacred, and part of honoring that sacredness is recognizing that not everyone is qualified to evaluate your value. Their misunderstanding is not your responsibility to fix. Their silence is not your cue to doubt. Their approval is not your gateway to begin. As long as you're measuring your identity by someone else's ruler, you'll remain disconnected from the inner compass that already knows the way. This is the deeper intelligence Jung pointed to: the call to individuate, to separate your soul's voice from the collective noise. Your authenticity is not up for debate. Your peace is not up for negotiation. What's truly powerful is not being liked by everyone. It's being fully aligned with who you are, even when that scares people. You didn't come here to be a diluted version of yourself. You came here to walk like you know who you are, to speak like your truth matters, and to hold your spiritual posture even when no one claps. When someone tries to make you feel small, remember, you're not too much. They're just not prepared. You're not hard to love. They're just unfamiliar with depth. And you're not difficult. You're discerning. The more you honor your worth, the more you'll attract situations, opportunities, and relationships that reflect your frequency, not your fear. This is the moment you stop waiting for validation and start living from alignment. You are not who they say you are. You are who you remember yourself to be when the noise fades and the soul speaks. Let that voice be your guide. Let that knowing be your home. Let your worth be non-negotiable. If you're ready to stop letting others define your worth and take back your emotional freedom, comment below, "I define my own value." And if this message speaks to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. Your voice matters here. 5. Set boundaries to protect your energy. When you begin to set boundaries, you are not pushing people away. You are inviting your highest self to rise. You are finally saying, "My energy is sacred," and that silent declaration changes everything. The moment you stop giving everyone open access to your mind, your time, and your emotions, you start to feel the return of your personal power. People might say you've changed, but what's really happening is that you're no longer available for your own disrespect. You've realized that constantly saying yes to others was a slow and quiet way of saying no to yourself. Carl Jung taught us that the soul becomes troubled not because of outer chaos, but because of inner betrayal when we abandon our truth to keep the peace, to be accepted, to avoid confrontation. But what if the real confrontation is with yourself? What if the war is within every time you smile when you're hurting, agree when you're unsure, or stay silent when your spirit is screaming? The most dangerous form of exhaustion is not physical, it's emotional. It's the slow drain that comes from unspoken boundaries, from relationships built on obligation instead of mutual respect. It's allowing guilt to become your compass and fear to become your script. You don't have to keep proving your goodness by tolerating what drains you. Spiritual wisdom begins the moment you understand that self-respect is the foundation of inner peace. Intelligence isn't just about knowing facts. It's about knowing yourself deeply enough to protect your energy like the rare force it is. When you allow too much access, you become too predictable, too convenient. But the more selective you become, the more magnetic you are. The more you choose intentional silence over forced performance, the more people begin to recognize your presence as something rare, something real. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to a life where your needs matter just as much as your love. They are the invisible lines where your authenticity breathes, where your nervous system relaxes, where your peace returns. And yes, some people will test them. But every time you uphold them, you teach your nervous system safety. You teach your inner child protection. You teach the world how to treat you. This is emotional intelligence in action. It is the unseen spiritual awakening where you are no longer reacting. You are choosing intentionally who gets your presence, your story, your softness. Carl Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So if your life keeps repeating patterns of burnout, resentment, and overgiving, maybe it's not fate, it's a boundary that hasn't been drawn yet. You weren't born to absorb the chaos of others. You were born to radiate clarity. And clarity comes when you stop negotiating your worth, when you stop explaining your no, when you stop proving your right to be at peace. You don't need to become louder to be heard. You need to become clearer to be respected. Spiritual power is quiet. It is felt, not forced. And the more you protect your energy, the more that power begins to speak for you without saying a word. 6. Detach from the opinions of others. When you begin to truly evolve in your spiritual development, you reach a place where peace no longer comes from how others see you. It comes from how deeply you're rooted in your own being. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And yet so many people abandon themselves daily just to be accepted by others who don't even know how to accept themselves. You weren't created to bend under the weight of other people's opinions. You weren't born to seek approval from those who are still at war with their own reflection. Your soul came here for alignment, not applause. Every time you choose your truth over performance, you heal. Every time you choose presence over reaction, you grow. And every time you choose peace over proving yourself, you ascend into a higher level of emotional intelligence that cannot be disturbed by surface-level noise. This is the essence of real spiritual wisdom, not needing the world to validate who you are, because your self-worth is no longer on trial. You don't have to explain your soul to people who aren't listening. You don't have to prove your energy to people who cannot feel it. Detachment isn't a sign of weakness. It's the signature of those who are emotionally sovereign. You are no longer available to be defined by projections, misunderstood by those who cannot see past their filters, or drained by defending a truth that stands strong in silence. The deeper your spiritual awakening, the less interested you become in convincing anyone of your value. You learn that not reacting is an act of wisdom, not submission. That walking away from what disturbs your spirit is an act of sacred self-protection. That silence can be power, and detachment can be love. You realize that not every opinion deserves a response. Not every person deserves access to your peace, and not every moment requires a reaction. Emotional maturity is knowing the difference. There is no deeper spiritual wisdom than protecting your energy without guilt. In a world obsessed with noise, your calm will threaten those addicted to chaos. In a culture addicted to visibility, your ability to remain unseen but spiritually strong becomes a rare aura that speaks louder than words. And while others are busy fighting for attention, you'll be busy aligning with purpose. While they seek validation, you'll be deepening your truth. The moment you release the need to be liked is the moment you become free. That's when you understand that spirituality is not about performance. It's about presence. It's about being so whole within yourself that even when others try to misunderstand, dismiss, or criticize you, your peace remains untouched. That is your real power. That is your true spiritual development. If you're ready to stop living by other people's opinions and start standing firm in your truth, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss content that helps you reclaim your inner power. Comment below. I release the need for approval. I am free. 7. Respond with silence, not anger. There is a quiet power in not reacting that speaks louder than any outburst. And in this stillness lies the essence of spiritual awakening. When someone attempts to provoke you, disrespects you, or tries to pull you into their chaos, your ability to remain calm is not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of deep spiritual maturity and emotional intelligence. Carl Jung taught that what irritates us in others is often a reflection of something unresolved within ourselves. And that's why silence becomes a sacred mirror. Instead of becoming a prisoner of your emotional triggers, you become the master of your internal state. And this shift changes everything. Anger is fast and shallow. It's the mind's impulsive attempt to defend the ego. But silence, that sacred pause, is deep, transformative, and sovereign. It is in that moment of restraint that your true power emerges, because when you stop reacting, you start choosing. And choice is the foundation of all spiritual freedom. People expect noise, explanation, retaliation, but when you meet aggression with presence, when you offer stillness instead of storm, your aura speaks what words cannot. This isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending things don't affect you. It's about standing in your truth so powerfully that nothing external can shake your inner alignment. You no longer fight to be seen or understood, because you recognize that not everyone has the spiritual bandwidth to meet you where you are. That's why silence is not avoidance, it's selection. It's the conscious act of protecting your energy from those who cannot yet hold it. And in this energy, your peace becomes magnetic. You stop being reactive and instead become reflective. You don't argue with projections. You don't dance with dysfunction. You don't let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. You observe, you breathe, and you reclaim your power in the space where others lose theirs. Modern life is filled with noise, urgency, and triggers that test your presence every day. Online comments, traffic, family tension, workplace stress. But responding with stillness instead of outrage is not only revolutionary, it's the most elevated form of self-respect. Because every time you respond with silence instead of anger, you are not losing the moment, you are mastering it. You are transmuting emotional chaos into grounded wisdom, and that is the work of the awakened soul. You become the still water in the storm, the unshakable root beneath the surface, the calm eye at the center of your own inner hurricane. And while others may seek validation through loud reactions, you build quiet empires within. This is spirituality in action, not in rituals or robes, but in your ability to hold peace when the world offers you war. The one who chooses silence is not the one who loses the argument, but the one who refuses to lower their frequency to win it. If this message resonates with you, speak it into existence. I choose silence over anger. I protect my peace and respond with wisdom. If you feel the power in this, like the video, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of truth and growth. 8. Practice gratitude to dissolve anger. Carl Jung once said that even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and that truth becomes a guiding force when learning how to never get angry or bothered by anyone. The real alchemy begins not by resisting anger, but by transforming it, and the most underrated but spiritually intelligent way to do that is through the power of gratitude. When you're angry, it often means your mind is locked in a repetitive loop, obsessed with what should have happened, what someone should have said, or how things should have gone. But gratitude shatters that mental trap. It doesn't ignore the pain. It shifts your emotional posture from victimhood to spiritual power. You're not saying everything is perfect. You're saying, even in this moment, there's something sacred I refuse to overlook. That act alone brings spiritual wisdom into the body, quiets the nervous system, and reclaims your energy from the chaos of reaction. Anger feeds off the illusion that we've lost control. Gratitude reminds us that we still have power. The moment you choose to focus on what's still working, what you still love, what hasn't been taken from you, You interrupt the ego's urge to retaliate or defend. It's not weakness, it's emotional intelligence in motion. When someone disrespects you, you don't need to spiral into rage to prove your worth. You pause, ground yourself in what truly matters, and remember, my peace is not up for sale. That choice doesn't make you passive, it makes you spiritually untouchable. Carl Jung called this the individuation process, the sacred journey of unifying all fragmented parts of the self. And anger is just one of those fragments, crying out to be integrated, not indulged. In relationships, gratitude becomes a mirror that reflects growth instead of grudges. You start seeing the argument not as betrayal, but as a teacher. You begin noticing that every disappointment was preparing you for discernment. Every rejection was redirecting you to alignment. And every wound was waking you up to your own neglected power. This is spirituality in its rawest form, not floating above conflict, but learning how to rise through it without losing your center. Every thank you whisper in moments of frustration is a psychological reset, a declaration that you're more committed to your peace than to being right. That's not just maturity, it's magnetic prosperity. Science now backs what mystics have always known. Gratitude changes the brain. It rewires your focus, redirects your emotional patterns, and sharpens your spiritual vision. The more you practice it, the more emotionally resilient you become, not because life gets easier, but because your inner world gets stronger. You stop being so reactive to noise, comments, or behaviors that once triggered you. Because you're living from a higher awareness that knows every external drama is an invitation to return inward. And when you live like that, anchored, awake, and unbothered, you don't just manage anger. You dissolve it. You turn what once consumed you into clarity. You become the kind of person who doesn't just seek peace, but embodies it, because you've made gratitude your default setting and your quiet rebellion. If you've made it this far, you're someone who chooses peace over anger. Drop a comment saying, "Gratitude is my power," to affirm your shift toward calm and clarity. Stay with us. Your journey to inner peace is only just beginning. 9. Reframe criticism as growth. When someone criticizes you, they're not just attacking your character. They're handing you a map to the parts of yourself that still need healing. Instead of recoiling in defense, pause and ask yourself what part of you is reacting. Carl Jung reminds us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And within that idea lies the key to emotional freedom. Most people mistake criticism as rejection, but those on a path of spiritual development see it as revelation. When you no longer see critique as a threat, but as a mirror, your whole inner world changes. You stop giving away your power to the opinions of others, and instead use every uncomfortable moment as a tool for deepening your spiritual intelligence. You realize that not everything said to you is true, but everything that affects you emotionally is pointing to something within you that still seeks resolution. That's where the growth is. That's where real transformation begins. You can either protect your ego or evolve your soul, but you can't do both at the same time. When you choose spiritual growth, you commit to self-inquiry over self-defense. You ask questions like, why does this comment hurt me? What belief is it pressing against? What truth have I avoided facing? And in doing so, you strip away the illusions of identity that were built just to feel safe. Criticism then becomes sacred. It's no longer a wound, but a window. Every harsh word, every dismissive tone, every passive-aggressive jab becomes an opportunity to observe your emotional reflexes, not obey them. You begin to master your energy instead of leaking it through reaction. This is the difference between unconscious resistance and conscious refinement. One keeps you in loops, the other moves you forward. Not all criticism is valid, but all criticism is valuable when you are spiritually awake. You learn to discern. You sift through the projections, absorb the wisdom, and let go of what isn't yours without bitterness. You become calm, not because life is easy, but because your self-awareness is deep. You are no longer ruled by the need to be liked, the urge to retaliate, or the compulsion to explain yourself. You realize that inner peace isn't found by silencing others. It's found by silencing your attachment to being understood. And in that silence, power returns. You rise above the noise with grace. You move differently, not to avoid pain, but to alchemize it. That is the essence of spiritual wisdom. That is how you stop being bothered by anyone and start becoming a master of your own presence. This is not avoidance. It's the embodiment. You embody the truth that people's opinions are reflections of their own filters, not your reality. You hold space for your growth while releasing the need to convince. You realize that someone else's misunderstanding of you does not make you less whole. It only shows where they have yet to understand themselves. And with that understanding, you begin to treat criticism as data, not drama. You stop giving it authority and start using it as fuel. Your response is no longer about them. It's about you reclaiming every part of yourself that used to get shaken. This is spirituality in action. This is how your spiritual development turns wounds into wisdom, reaction into reflection, and discomfort into clarity. And once you learn to do that, you become emotionally untouchable, not because nothing is said about you, but because nothing said about you holds power over your peace. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful insights on transforming criticism into a tool for growth. What once felt like rejection can become redirection if you're open to the lesson. Stick around. Your breakthrough starts with a shift in perspective. 10. Master the art of letting go. There is a quiet kind of intelligence that doesn't need to prove itself. It simply observes, lets go, and moves forward with grace. You don't need to win every argument or explain yourself to be at peace. Real spiritual wisdom lies in mastering the emotional space between what happens and how you choose to respond. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And that choice begins the moment you stop giving people power over your nervous system. Emotional mastery isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about recognizing that not everything deserves your reaction. The more spiritually awakened you become, the more you understand that anger is often an invitation to engage in battles that drain your energy and disconnect you from your higher self. You don't have to accept every invitation to chaos. Some people come to trigger you, not to teach you, and your silence is the boundary they didn't expect. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't hurt. It means you've grown enough to honor what happened without being held hostage by it. Intelligence is knowing when to stay silent, when to walk away, and when to preserve your inner peace like sacred ground. You begin to feel it in your body when something no longer deserves a response. Your breathing slows, your heart softens, your spirit rises. That's the turning point. You realize that healing doesn't come from closure, it comes from self-respect. Jung reminded us that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So instead of chasing validation, you begin to ask, what is this reaction revealing about me? And from that space of self-awareness, you stop needing revenge, resolution, or recognition. You find power in restraint, not reaction. Letting go becomes your declaration of freedom. You no longer wait for the apology. You become at peace. You no longer try to change what cannot be controlled. You simply let it pass through you, like the wind, and you remain centered in your own stillness. You don't explain your silence. You wear it like armor. And in this stillness, you begin to magnetize everything that aligns with your intelligence and spiritual wisdom. You walk away, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown the drama. You stop proving your worth because you've embodied it. You stop shrinking yourself to be understood because you've chosen to be whole. This is what it means to master the art of letting go, not to run away, but to rise above with power, precision, and peace. To affirm your commitment to inner peace, declare your release. Comment below, I choose to let go, to mark your moment of freedom, and inspire others to free themselves from what no longer serves them. And remember, your peace is a sacred power that no one can take unless you hand it over. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Let this be the moment you choose inner mastery over external reaction. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video. Share it with someone who needs this spiritual reminder, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Tap the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming content on emotional intelligence, spiritual awakening, and Carl Jung's timeless insights. Until next time, stay calm, stay aware, and stay wise.